Winter Wyvern has always been notorious for her capabilities to grief her own team, but when mastered, this support can win teamfights with a single ultimate, solo kill cores, and even scale to the late game. This guide aims to help you do more of the latter rather than the former. Before we get to the heart of the matter, I have today's question for you. Which support has the highest skill cap? So what makes Wyvern so difficult to play? We need to take a look at her skill set and base stats to find that out. The first issue is impossible to miss. This hero is slow. Around Crystal Maiden slow. Well, at least Crystal Maiden has 600 attack range with a decent damage and attack speed, as opposed to Wyvern with the amazing starting stats of 41 base damage, 425 range, and a solid roughly 1.5 armor. The only saving grace is the high starting HP and mana pool at 680 and 390 respectively. A stat line that is horrible firmly puts the hero in the category of weak laners, which is not great for a support, which is normally expected to excel in the laning stage. So what makes this hero playable at all? In short, her spells. All 4 of them are extremely powerful and versatile, although hard to use properly. Let's examine them in order. Her first spell, Arctic Burn, is a high cooldown buff that makes Winter Wyvern attack with increased range and augments her attacks to apply a slow that deals a percentage of the target's current health every second as damage, and it gives her increased night vision. Moreover, the buff also grants Wyvern flying, much like Batrider. You can fly over trees, cliffs, you name it. Her second spell is Splinter Blast. This ability fires a harmless projectile at a target, which then spawns splinters on every enemy target around the impact, causing massive damage and slow. The slow projectile, followed by the slow splinters, as well as the special targeting, makes the spell very limited in its use. Fortunately, the cast range is immense, while the mana cost is manageable, so it's a great spell to use to clear waves and defend towers. Her third spell is Cold Embrace. This ability is only usable on allies, and it freezes them in place for 4 seconds, effectively stunning them. However, this also heals for a large amount of health and makes the frozen target immune to physical damage. Even though it's a potent save, the 4-second stun makes this very hard to use, as it's easy to make the situation worse rather than better with that drawback. Finally, her ultimate is Winter's Curse. This ability is a high-range single target debuff that does a bunch of things. First, it stuns the target for a pretty long duration that makes every enemy hero in a 500 radius attack the cursed target with increased attack speed. However, under the curse's duration, every affected hero can only take damage from the curse and Wyvern herself. This ability also pierces BKB on the main target, but does not for the AoE taunt effect. To put it bluntly, Curse is a crazy powerful ability, but the drawbacks make it really hard to use well in a fight, since it can block your own team's damage if used incorrectly. Overall, Wyvern is a unique hero, but all of her abilities come with drawbacks, conditions, and her base stats are garbage. Not only that, but 2 of her abilities have the potential to grief your teammates so hard it can lose fights. Hard to play, but extremely versatile. We've already mentioned how Wyvern's stat line is awful, and her spells don't really make up for that either, but you do have a few options to play around with. The hero can be played in multiple roles, most commonly 4 or 5. The main difference in approach lies here in the laning stage. We'll start tackling the differences. As position 5, you'll want to skill Arctic Burn in most matchups with one important exception. If it's your ability to secure range creeps on the lane, take Splinter Blast level 1. Then at level 2, take whichever of the 2 you don't have, then max Splinter Blast first. Take a value point in your heal at level 4. Pay attention to avoid pushing the creep wave with Splinter Blast as you secure those creeps or harass your opponents. Against some offlaners like Furion, it might be advantageous to shove the lane. In this case, you can be a lot more liberal with how you use Splinter Blast. As position 4, you'll often want to push the lane, so you should skill Splinter Blast level 1 in most lanes. Use it to push into the enemy tower as you secure creeps, to move the lane equilibrium and give you a creep advantage you can use to dive the enemy tower. Use it often and try to hit both heroes with it. With Arctic Burn, the main drawback to worry about is the long cooldown. Since you should max Splinter first, this spell will have 50 seconds cooldown for the entirety of the laning stage. Those 50 seconds are worth the wait though, since this ability is one of the most damaging slows in the game, and when combined with Splinter Blast, it can easily net you kills as soon as you hit level 2. It can also be used defensively by flying over trees to avoid getting killed if the enemies go on you instead. Since the ability is so potent but has a long cooldown, you'll need to play around with it if you want to avoid taking bad fights. If you have Burn ready, you can be aggressive. If you have it on cooldown, it's time to dial back and avoid taking trades. Now that we know the hero's tools and weaknesses, we can decide the starting items. On position 5, you'll generally want to buy plenty of regen, some stats to pad out your terrible base damage, and mangoes to sustain your Splinter Blasts. I like to go with 2 sets of tangos, a salve, 2 mangoes, a fairy fire, and 2 branches. On position 4, the only difference is that sometimes you might want to buy boots instead of the regen. Go for it if the enemy position 5 is a low range lane bully like Ogre, who you need to kite. Otherwise, stick to the same build as position 5. By the end of the laning stage, you should aim for the standard supporting set of at least a magic wand, boots, and a windlace. After laning stage, 4 and 5 Wyvern play pretty much the same, so the rest of the guide is meant for both positions. Wyvern is extremely versatile as you have a wave clear, a save, a busted teamfight ability that can be used to set up ganks, and Arctic Burn lets you both initiate fights as well as make you super hard to catch when holding a tower. That versatility gives you the freedom to do anything on the map, so always adjust to what your team needs. You are best at holding towers out of all the options, but don't shy away from being the playmaker running around with smokes either. When you're holding a tower, you'll primarily play around Splinter Blast. It has insane range, and from level 4 it one-shots range creeps, so use it on every incoming wave from a safe distance. Ideally behind trees under your tower. If the enemy tries to dive you, simply use Arctic Burn to fly over trees and avoid the gank. If your team is ready to turn the fight around, you can also use Curse to give your team the time to TP in and kill whoever is foolish enough to make a dive on a Winter Wyvern with an ultimate ready. All of your spells cost a fair amount of mana, however, so make sure to spam clarities as needed. When playing aggressive, your best tool is Arctic Burn. Use the flying vision and pathing it gives to surprise your enemies from an angle they won't expect, and open team fights with the curse to open for your team, much like Beastmaster's Roar would do. Don't hesitate to use it on single targets as just a stun. It has a measly 90 seconds cooldown after all. You can also use the flying to get wards into great spots the enemy wouldn't expect, and the extra attack range makes dewarding a lot safer. Once you spend a few minutes pushing or holding towers and the map opens up, it's usually time for the bigger team fights where this hero really shines. The basics are the same as every support. Avoid giving away your position, use your high range to stay in the back, and use spells as needed. So, how does that apply to Wyvern? To start with, which ability should you max after Splinter Blast? In virtually every game, you should max Arctic Burn first, followed by the heal. For your talents, go for the plus 50 damage on level 10, increased night vision on level 15, cold embrace cooldown on 20, and Splinter Blast stun on level 25. On level 15, if you feel like you're dying too much, you can take the health instead. On to the abilities. First, Arctic Burn. In bigger fights, this is mostly going to be used for the flying and vision to get into position for your ultimate. Always aim to start fights next to trees or cliffs so you can abuse this skill to avoid enemy heroes that jumped your backline, or to get a good initiation off with Curse. Once the spell is maxed out, the incredible range it gives just makes hitting someone with auto attacks quite safe, so don't forget to use it. The Splinter Blast is quite underwhelming in fights. Use it as you see a good opportunity for it, but it's not where your impact comes from. Your save, Cold Embrace, is a difficult one. On one hand, saving someone from a heavy hitter like Sven for 4 seconds is busted, but the 4 seconds freeze exposes your teammates to potentially dying anyways. The key to using this ability well is to establish when you want to use it even before the fight starts, rather than winging it as you go. Keep in mind which enemy hero does what damage types, and only use the heal if someone is being targeted by the physical damage types, mostly the carry. You can also use it on already stunned allies, as the freeze is not a drawback in that case. Saving the best for last, Curse will be your most important tool for any fight. The sheer number of applications the skill has makes it hard to use, but there are a few things to keep in mind that always apply. First, always make sure you know who you want to curse, much like the Cold Embrace. In most games, you'll only want to curse 1 or 2 heroes, and it's your job to make sure you are in position to do that. Also keep in mind what your curse is for. Do you want to start the fight with it, or are you responding to someone jumping in? If you want to start fights, you need to make sure that the curse goes first to avoid blocking your team's damage, while if you're using the curse to counter enemies, you can be a bit more lax with the order. When choosing who to curse, don't forget that it pierces spell immunity and it's undispellable. This makes Curse ideal against heroes like Puck or Slark because they can't avoid getting chain stun from the curse in any way. It is important not to tunnel vision on that one hero though. If the enemies screw up and stack 3 to 4 heroes on top of each other, just curse them regardless of who is in it. Don't just wait for those moments, but rather use the opportunity as it comes. As a side note, don't forget that while your allies can't, you can deal damage into the curse. Use that Arctic Burn DOT and Splinter Blast along with the ulti, it'll make a huge difference. Now that we know how the hero fights, we also see what the common issues can be. You're a typical backliner, so heroes like Storm and Ricky that can jump on you are an absolute pain. Buy defensive items such as Glimmer, Force Staff, or Yules in that case. If you don't need to deal with any of these heroes, your best items are a Blink and an Aether Lens, as both of them will help you get off your ultimate at the perfect times. I generally prefer Lens, as the fight buildup is much better for the hero, but Blink can be just as good, especially if it's your job to start fights. Your heroes also deal quite a bit of damage though, and in games when you're doing really well, mostly in position 4, you can go into offensive items like Orchid Malevolence or Power Treads and Drums to help you get potential solo kills. That's gonna be it for this guide. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Wyvern can be a daunting hero to learn, but I promise you it is a hero worth learning, as she's been a strong and reliable staple in almost every patch in both pubs and competitive play. She's especially great for the solo queue with her versatility.